Hello, my name is Dr. John Morozic, and I'll be teaching your finance class on budgeting, finances, and allocations in organizations. So I'm going to go a little bit into my background to get us started for the class before I actually start the class, but I wanted to share a little bit of bio with you, and I want to focus that through the lens of, um, of my grown-up years. So what I want to start with, and some of this is going to be redundant from previous ones that you've listened to, but I just want to start off by saying currently I lead a business called Shared XP. It's a part-time executive business, kind of in a fractional model, where I come in, I do some work for a church or nonprofit or even for-profit to help with their back office, the business side of the ministry or the business side of the nonprofit. I come in and with best practices that I've gathered over years of being in business and also working for several customers, I come in and clear up a lot of things, get them all running properly. I teach business and leadership courses, which is one of my favorite things to do. And I moved to Colorado Springs in 2007 from a suburb in Chicago. And at this point, I quite honestly have no intention of going back to Chicago. Don't tell the Chicago people that. So I was born to a teenage mother, believe it or not, and she was not trained well in money. My mom, if she had a $10 bill in her pocket, she would spend $11. And I only learned that looking through the lens of an adult, but when I was a kid, that was just the way we lived. So my mom was always struggling for money, struggling for cash. That turned me into a bit of a control freak when it comes to my finances because I want to know where every nit and tittle is because I'm feeling insecure. I loved making money as a kid. I was a saver. I saved everything I ever made. So I started cutting lawns when I was really young. I saved up enough money, at the time I think it was about $7, to purchase a push mower. So I could use that alongside our garden tractor to cut lawns for people in the neighborhood. And here I am just 8, 9, 10 years old at this point, learning how to run a business and make money. I plowed driveways. I vacuumed out my dad's car. As I said before, I did that for 25 cents, and that to me was big money. I started working at my grandfather's feed store when I was 12 years old. So here I am, 12 years old, carrying 50-pound bags of feed on my shoulder. It was not an easy thing. And he paid me $1.35 an hour, which at the time he felt was too much, but he was trying to be gracious. So I make $1.35 an hour, 2 or 3 days a week, through 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 hours a day, and full day on Saturday. I saved up about $150 cutting lawns, and I was able to purchase my own riding lawnmower. So I had a riding lawnmower, a push mower, and all summer long I was busy making money. The bottom line is that I learned that if I saved money, I could control what I owned. I was in control of it because I was purchased with my own money. I graduated from high school, and as I did, I was a mediocre student. I got A's. I was on the honor roll occasionally and stuff. Some of the classes, like math, drove me completely crazy, and I didn't do well in those. But I got through them, and that's all that mattered at the time. But when I graduated from school, my family had decided that I wasn't smart enough to go to college. I would just waste it. So they said, you're good with your hands and stuff. What other careers could you look into? So fresh out of high school, I attended a 6-month program in Laramie, Wyoming called Wyoming Tech, which was a heavy-duty truck parts or heavy-duty truck repair school. And that's what I did for the first 5 years. I switched to computers about the middle of that 5 years. I started going to DeVry 3 nights a week for a couple hours every week for 2 years. And I learned computers at a completely unnecessary level. But I also learned at the time about financial packages and how they operated. And I also did quite a bit of work around the finance budgeting and putting together spreadsheets and stuff like that, even as I was going through school. I worked in corporate for about 20 years, and during that 20 years, I did everything from soldering boards, repairing monitors, fixing keyboards, all the way up to the IT director of a nationwide retailer with 181 stores. Would you believe that retailer also sold heavy-duty truck parts? So you see some synergies in there. It started my future career as an interpreter between the business segments. I could actually talk truck if you wanted me to talk truck, or I could talk finance if you wanted me to talk finance because of my training. I could talk computer if you needed me to do that. So I could do different things, and I acted as an interpreter. It really worked out well, and I got promoted and bonused because of it. I completed a bachelor's degree and a master's to learn business training. I had learned at the church that I was attending that I had the gifts of leadership, teaching, and administration. and I wanted to take that leadership gift and polish it to super bright. So I thought, okay, I need to go back to college. So I ate college up. I think it was a mistake I didn't go in the first place, but I loved it. I loved all the learning and the practical application of what I was learning. I would just go to the office the next day and plug it in and go to work. It was really useful stuff. I took a handful of years off after the master's and came back in 2015, and that's when I got a PhD in organizational development and leadership. So I'm actually a doctor, and I have a lot of fun with that because most people say, truck mechanic, feed store guy, computer technician, now a doctor? And I said, well, I'm not that kind of doctor. Backing up a bit, in 2003, a counselor gave me permission to start my own business. I had been in and out of so many jobs in the IT world. I would come in, fix things, and then they would get rid of me and hire somebody cheap to do the job or run the system that I had created. So I got out of that, and a counselor said, hey, I think you could run your own business. So I did a case study on Northern Illinois, figured out that the horse feed industry in Northern Illinois is bigger than it is in Kentucky, believe it or not. And there was a real need because the feed store guys were aging off and were trying to sell their businesses, that I could roll in, pick up one, pick up two, pick up three, and pick them all up and eventually take over the whole feed store industry. That was a great plan. The only problem was the gentleman that I bought my first business from was extraordinarily crooked. He took all the good customers from me and left me with the lousy ones, and eventually it bankrupted me. So me and the wife, we would spend days driving into the office, which was a 45-minute drive from our home into the store, and we would cry our way there because we just didn't have any money. People would not pay us for the feed they'd used, and we tried to go get it, and once it's been through the horse, nobody wants it. So it's like, that was really a shame. So we ended up finally in bankruptcy for the business and personally because they were cross-collateralized between the two, and taught me some incredible lessons, which I brought into ministry. So I started my role as an executive pastor out here in Colorado Springs, and I took all my business stuff with me, and I said, hey, I'm going to fix the ministry world, and the ministry world ended up fixing me. I'm not a debits and credits kind of guy, although I had to do that with my feed store because I ran QuickBooks and I had to figure all that out. I'm not a debits and credits kind of guy. I'm more of the CFO, strategic type person, dip down, do some director and direct management of finance resources. I've done some of that as well. But at the end of the day, I'm much more about the projections, how to run the business with finances, all those kind of things, not so much writing checks, keying in money, accounts receivable, accounts payable, all that stuff drives me crazy. Along the way, because of my new business training and what I've learned also in my doctorate, I've been able to continue being an interpreter. So now I'm interpreting between business people and ministry people, and it's a different world, quite honestly, between the two of them. And so I have to sit in the middle of them, and I talk back and forth between both sides. I strive for a common language that they understand and try to drill things down to where the ground is level and we can all stand on it. Whereas sometimes finance people say gibberish to ministry people, and ministry people say gibberish to finance people, and it just doesn't go well. I try to help with that. I help leadership understand the reports on how to best leverage their finance people. So I frequently create a lot of dashboards with actual gauges on them that have red, yellow, and green. And if you're supposed to bring in 20 grand a month and you're bringing in 20, the needle's in the green where it's supposed to be. If you're bringing in 18, it's in the yellow. And if you're bringing in 10, it's in the red. So people that are non-finance trained can read these dashboards and say, hey, I can get a sense for where we're at because all our needles are in the green. That must mean we're okay. Now after all this, everybody thinks that I'm a finance expert, which I'd rather be anything else than a finance expert. I think and lead finance is like a regular person, not a finance expert. So that's what I want to translate to you as we talk about this class. Will just be, how do we apply and use some of this knowledge in a practical, regular person kind of way, instead of as a CFO talking about dividends and profit margins and all this stuff that finance or ministry people don't really always understand. I also believe that I am a steward of God's resources and I have to do my best. God is receiving donations from his people. The reciprocal for that is the church, and the church needs to manage that well, be accountable for it, be able to report on it. So I do a lot of stuff to help make sure churches and nonprofits report properly and clearly to their donors. So we're going to tackle this course from the following perspectives. Our job is to make sure it gets done versus doing it ourselves. At the level that we're talking about, that you guys are sitting in this class through, we're going to jump up and we're going to travel at the 10,000 foot level, not the tactical on the ground level. Your job is not to cut checks, it's not to sign checks, it's not to do all the mechanics of finance. Your job is to make sure it gets done. So how do you create an environment around you of people who are gifted and impassioned and experienced in their roles, and you lead them? That's what we're going to kind of focus on. We are ultimately responsible for everything financial, so we will need to dip down enough to understand what's really happening. At the end of the day, the buck always stops at the highest leader. So as a CFO, as a director of finances, it's going to stop with you. So if somebody within your organization is messing up, it's going to come washing back on you. So we got to create a system and processes that allow us to dip down and check to make sure that things are happening like they said they're happening. Because once you become a CFO, people just kind of throw sunshine and kisses your way all the time and don't really tell you the truth always. We will create people-centric systems and processes, not profit-centric, but people-centric. We will discuss best practices in systems. We will bounce back and forth from tactical to 10,000 feet up. That way you get some change of perspective there and be able to understand what's happening down here when you're traveling up here. We will not trust anyone too much because we want to make sure to protect them from mistakes or temptation. So every finance person I've ever hired, I trust them as far as I can trust them, but I don't trust them completely, because finances is just such a touchy thing. It's a slippery slope. So we're going to make sure we have the right amount of interaction between us and our followers. And then lastly, as a steward of God's resources, we'll season every discussion and deliverable with a Christian worldview. And what we're trying to do there, when I say season, it's kind of like sprinkling salt on meat. You cover it all up, it affects the whole meat. We want to bring our Christian worldview into the discussion so that we can use some of God's wisdom and his support as we try to figure this class out. So there it is in a nutshell. Let's get started. Again, thanks for attending the class, and I'll see you in the classroom.